hoping it would be Robert. "Hi, it's me." It was Claudia.
Oh!
Oh well, I was glad to hear from her.
Wake
I
up,
settled in
Miffy.
on the couch, cradling the phone under my chin,
Hello,
preparing for a
Miffy.
good long chat with my best friend. "How's it going?" she asked. "Great," I told her enthusiastically. The Walker's place is a madhouse of
suits
people
you.
coming and going, but Grace and Henry are as cute as ever. Yesterday, I took them to the Museum of Natural History. We had a ball. You should see the new dinosaur exhibit they have there. It is so cool. Henry and Grace have already seen it a billion times, of course, but Ethan and I hadn't, so we... "Ethan?" Claudia interrupted. "Yes, he's this very, very cute guy who is working for the Walkers. He was going down in the elevator with us, so we started talking about the museum and he came with us." "Very cute, huh?"
Oh!
Claudia said, interested. "Very."
Oops.
I repeated. She asked me a few more questions about him. How tall, how old, what color eyes, and I filled her in. "But it's no big deal," I added. "He's just this really nice guy who is around a lot. You should have seen him when we went skating with the kids in Central Park today.
Okay,
Isn't it a
perfect.
little warm for skating?" Claudia asked. "In line, silly," I laughed. "Man, can he rollerblade. He can do spins and jumps and everything. I felt like a snail compared to him. But you know, he wasn't a show-off at all. He was only doing those tricks because Henry asked him to. He was so good with Henry, so patient. He taught him how to rollerblade. At first, Henry was afraid, but by the end of the afternoon, he could do it. Ethan was a big help because Henry felt proud of himself, and I was free to help Grace, who is still on training roller skates. "He sounds great," Claudia commented. "Oh, he is," I agreed. "What's happening in Stony Brook?" "The Mexican festival, mostly," she told me. "How's that going?" "Don't ask." "Bad?" "Mucho bad. Abby is just moving way too fast on this. Nothing is planned right. She keeps hitting us up for money to pay for her little projects. Out of the blue, she decided we have to give out flyers. I was up until midnight last night drawing sombreros. She's having them copied today, and the festival is this Saturday. Christy would laugh if she heard all this, I said. She'd laugh, or she'd have a fit, Claudia said. This reminds me of the time we went to California and saw how disorganized the We Love Kids Club was. Remember how that nearly drove Christy insane? I laughed, remembering how out of hand things can get when events and schedules aren't properly organized. This is going to be more of a fiasco than a festival if you ask me, Claudia said. Good luck, I told her. I bet Abby pulls through at the end. I sure hope so. There was a slight pause in our conversation. I was going to tell Claude about my plans to take the Circle Line boat tour around Manhattan the next day, when she started talking. Tomorrow, Stacy,
download it on audio.
Our voices overlapped and we laughed. You go first, I said. Claudia sighed miserably. Stacy, I have some bad news. I straightened up, sitting forward on the couch.
Stacy's gonna be sad when she
What?
hears this sad news.
It's about
Robert has been seeing Andy Gentile
My heart
behind
slammed
Stacy's
into my
back.
chest. Is he
On
all
the
right?
Babysitter's Club
I
series,
asked urgently. Fine,
Robert is
Mommy,
Stacy's boyfriend.
fine, Claudia assured me. Then what
Stacy on
could
the
it be?
Babysitter's Club series.
I waited.
Andy
think-
Gentile, a girl at their school.
I mean, I'm pretty sure.
Uh-huh.
I'm
Yeah.
positive, really. Stacy, Robert has been seeing Andy Gentile.
You said you'd
I
beat his
heard her
butt?
words, but I didn't. Stacy? Claudia spoke into the phone. Stacy, are you there? Yeah? I wouldn't tell you if I wasn't sure. Claudia went on.
Could you put it in the oven,
People have
Mummy?
been seeing them together
Mummy
all
loves
week.
baking with you.
I know,
Emily Bernstein
I know the difference,
saw them
Mama.
at Casa Grande
And I
again.
understand it with you.
Mal and
because of
Jessie
that.
spotted them playing tennis. All the while, I kept telling myself it might be nothing. But then I saw them myself today. They were downtown, and it's nothing. What do you mean? I asked quietly. Claudia mumbled something so fast I couldn't hear it.
A
What?
final touch.
She spoke quickly again, but this time I caught the words.
So
Great idea,
tasty.
Miffy.
I said he kissed
A
her.
final touch.
What?
I
On the
love it.
lips.
Great
So
idea,
a
Miffy.
I
final
hated
touch.
to ask, but I needed to know.
Great
A
idea.
final touch.
Great
Yeah.
idea, Miffy.
You saw it yourself. Yeah, I
I
did.
love so tasty.
We were both quiet
The
then,
cake is ready.
just hanging on the line. Thanks for telling me,
Delicious.
I said finally. Are you all right, Stacy? I think so. I'm not sure. It doesn't seem real yet.
Thanks,
I
Mummy.
guess you were right to feel suspicious of him. I nodded over the phone,
Hey, Mama.
which shows you the kind of shape I was in.
When I play my
Dazed,
Miffy's World
I
game,
suppose.
after I feed her,
Although
then I
I'd
take her
worried
upstairs to
about
go
this,
potty.
somehow now that my fears were confirmed, I didn't want to even think about it.
Oh,
Guess
yes,
I really
please.
am non-confrontational.
And then if there's any left over, definitely
I
something
sure
in the morning.
didn't want to face
Excuse me.
this. I'm going to hang up now.
You're awesome.
Okay? I said.
Thanks.
Okay. I'll call you tomorrow to make sure you're all right. Thanks, Claudia. Bye. For a moment, I sat on the couch, just staring. How could this be? For the last several months since I'd started seeing Robert, part of being me was being Stacy and Robert.
But yeah, Stacy and Robert hadn't even been
Stacy
dating
and
for
Robert
a year when he started
together
cheating.
forever. At least that's
It
what
was
I'd
because she
scribbled
had to go to
on
New
my
York
school
for a
notebooks.
babysitting job.
That's what I thought. Or maybe
So he
I
wanted to
simply
date someone
hadn't
who didn't have
thought.
to
I
go.
just assumed we'd keep going along and going along. I hadn't really
I was gonna
thought
say, I
about
don't-
the
I don't think-
future,
I don't know nothing
not
about that.
seriously. Yet I'd expected that Robert would always
Huh.
be there with me.
Oh,
Weren't we close? Didn't we care for and look out for one another? Didn't we enjoy spending time together? Wasn't that the way it was? How had this happened? A tear ran down my cheek.
oh.
Andy
Stacy's starting
couldn't
to
take
cry now.
Robert away from me. She couldn't. I wouldn't let her.
Yeah.
Who did she think she was? Robert
Huh?
was my boyfriend. Mine.
Whoops.
Now, tears gushed
Andy
from
was
my
the one who
eyes.
started it, though.
I jammed the palms of my hands
Convinced
into them.
him.
I didn't want to cry, but I couldn't help it. The tears kept coming. I heard Dad's keys in the lock and jumped up from the couch.
I said that
if he saw me
Andy
crying,
convinced
he'd want
Robert
to talk,
cheat. That's what
and
the
I couldn't
issue
stand
was.
to talk about that just then. Blinded by tears, I ran to my room.
Stacy, are you here?
Dad called
I
as
have
he
a
stepped
feeling
into
he
the
tried
apartment.
to.
In my room! I shouted back, making my voice as steady as I could. I could tell from his voice that he was outside my bedroom door.
Samantha and I want to take you out to eat.
I know.
He said.
I was just making
You
guesses.
go.
I don't know. I think she was
shouted
the one who
through the
convinced
closed
him.
door. I'm pooped.
Stacy,
Because you could
open
tell
up,
from the
please.
beginning chapter that she liked him.
There was no getting out of it. Drying my eyes on the bedsheet, I opened the door.
You've been crying.
Dad gasped.
What happened?
Robert is seeing someone else. I blurted out, tears flooding me once again. Dad put his arms around me, and I sobbed into his white work shirt. I cried for several minutes
Good
before
night,
looking
Miffy.
up. Dad asked
How do you
if I
know
was
that?
sure, and I told him what Claudia told me.
Why don't you call Robert yourself?
She liked when I laughed.
He suggested. Call Robert? The idea horrified me. I couldn't. What would I say? What would he say? I can't, Dad. I can't. I sobbed. Dad nodded sympathetically.
Wipe your eyes and then come out to eat with Samantha and me. She's waiting downstairs in a cab.
Samantha, Dad's friend, is pretty nice. I didn't mind going out with her, but I was in the mood to be by myself. I told Dad that, but he insisted.
You shouldn't be alone right now,
He said.
come on.
So I went. Dad and Samantha had planned to go to a burger place, but Dad switched plans. He told the cab driver to take us to Joe Allen's, which is one of my favorite restaurants in New York. We had a nice meal, though I probably wasn't much company. I hardly said a thing. I'm sure Samantha sensed something was wrong, but she didn't ask. That night after I said goodnight to Dad, I turned out the lights, but I couldn't sleep. I lay awake staring at the light the street lamp threw across my ceiling. What would Robert say if I asked him what was going on? I wondered about it, and the more I wondered, the more I wondered, the more I had to know. I got out of bed and went quietly into the living room. There was no real need to turn on the lights because a street lamp outside the window lit the room well enough for me to see the phone. It was about 9:45. Robert's family didn't go to bed until 10. I dialed Robert's number. His sister answered. Is Robert there, please? I said. I'll get him, she said. I heard her call him. In the distance, I could hear him ask her something. No, I don't know who it is, she shouted back, sounding irritated. I heard his blurred, indistinct voice again. Yes, it's a girl, his sister shouted. No, I'm not asking who it is. I'm not your secretary.
Hello?
Robert said. I opened my mouth to speak. Only a croaking sound came out. What would I say to him? I hung up. Clutching the phone in the dark, I hung my head and sobbed.
What happened?
Chapter 12.
Is something the matter?
Ethan asked me the next day as we stood on the top deck of the Circle Line boat. The boat was cruising past the gigantic twin towers at the southern tip of Manhattan. Henry leaned on the railing, gazing out at the impressive city skyline. Behind us, Grace had conked out, snoozing peacefully on a bench. It's nothing, I replied. A personal thing. Of course, I was thinking about Robert.
You seem really bummed.
Ethan observed. I forced a smile. I didn't know it showed. Sorry.
That's okay. Can I help?
I shook my head. Thanks anyway,
The opening tomorrow night will cheer you up,
he said.
I can't wait.
A breeze off the Hudson River whipped my hair into my face, pushing it back. I looked at Ethan. He had such a nice face. I was comfortable with him. He was just very thoughtful and a lot of fun. Will you be at the opening? I asked.
Yeah, I'm totally psyched. The show is going to be awesome. I can't believe the Walkers pulled it off. Last week they were so far behind. They didn't have nearly enough stuff finished or framed. But with you here this week, they accomplished a lot. You saved the day.
No, I didn't. I laughed. I only babysat.
Believe me, it made a big difference.
He insisted.
Anyway, wait until you see the show. It's great. A lot of important people will be there to see it.
Artists? I asked.
Artists and gallery owners and art critics. Publishing people will be there because Mrs. Walker does book and magazine illustrations. Almost everyone they invited accepted.
I guess it will be pretty exciting, I said.
Super exciting. It will even convince you to move back to the city.
I smiled. You think?
I hope.
Wake up,
He said
Miffy.
seriously. A tingling sensation at my temples told me I was blushing. Mortified, I turned away. Blushing like that was such a childish thing to do. But despite my embarrassment, I felt happy. I was glad Ethan wished I lived in the city. It made me wish I lived in the city full-time, too. When the tingling subsided, I turned back
Special
to Ethan.
delivery from Uncle Pilot.
That's nice of you to say, I told him. I sort of
Wow,
live in the city,
a
really.
new scooter
I'm
to
here a
whiz
lot
around
of
on.
weekends,
That's true.
he said, smiling. We looked at each other, and I was aware that my heart was pounding. Just then, Grace stirred on the bench. Rubbing her eyes, she sat up. Hi, I said, joining her. Did you have a good nap? She nodded sleepily. Henry sat on the bench with us. I'm hungry, he said. Grace was too, so we went inside and bought some snacks. From then on, the kids were awake and curious about everything they saw. Ethan and I pointed out the Empire State Building and other sights as we passed them. When the tour ended, we took a cab back to the Walkers.
Hey, want to go see the
la.
star show at the planetarium?
Ethan suggested. Yay! Henry cheered. Good idea, I agreed. I wanted to stay busy. I didn't want time to think about Robert. Don't you have to help hang the rest of the show, though? I asked Ethan.
Not until this evening.
Great, I said. We went to the planetarium and saw the show. Even Grace liked it, since she thought it was exciting to sit in a dark theater looking up at stars and planets. After that, we walked back to the Walker's apartment together.
How was your day?
Mr. Walker asked the kids as they ran to him and hugged him. He looked frazzled, with a thin smear of hot pink paint across his forehead and a patch of
Hello,
pearly
Mummy.
white paint in his hair. He'd been working hard this week. It was great, Henry told him, smiling.
Ethan, I could use you here in a minute,
Mrs. Walker said. She was fitting one of her paintings
make
with a
the
mat
cake.
and frame.
In
Ethan joined her. Hold this steady for me, would you?
Mix,
Mrs. Walker asked. It was time for me to go, so I said goodbye and left. On the street, I hailed a cab. As soon as I sat down, I felt terrible. By myself, there was
Could you
no
put it in the
distraction from my
oven, Mummy?
thoughts. I
Mummy
kept
loves
picturing
baking
Andy with
you.
Robert. It was awful, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. What was so special about Andy? Nothing that I could see.
Thanks, Mummy.
How could he like her better than me? Why had he stopped liking me? What had I done wrong? Maybe he needed somebody who didn't babysit and who didn't go away every other weekend. Someone who was there all the time. I thought of a million things that might be the matter with
Great
me.
idea, Miffy.
Every
tasty.
insecurity I'd
A
ever
final
felt
touch.
came zooming
I
back.
love
Great
it.
idea,
Was
cake
something
is
wrong
ready.
with my personality, my looks? Was I too thin? Was it the diabetes?
Delicious.
Did he want a girlfriend who could eat ice cream and junk food with him? Did he want someone who was part of his old crowd?
It could be.
Thanks, Mummy.
Maybe I took him away from his old friends too much. He might want a girlfriend who fit in better. By the time the cab pulled up to my dad's apartment on 65th Street, I felt like screaming. I couldn't stand the thoughts I was thinking. I longed to turn them off, but I couldn't. Dad wasn't home yet, so I turned on the TV. I watched every
Excuse
rerun that
me?
came on, one after the other, without even channel surfing for something good. When I couldn't stand it any longer, I dialed Robert's number again. Busy. Was he talking to Andy? Somehow I was positive he was.
Clean.
Dad came in around 7. He was in a great mood. Too great. I could tell he was trying to be super upbeat for my sake. "Come on," he said cheerfully. "We're going to the theater." "The theater?" I repeated. "Yup. We have an intern at work, and there's really not much for her to do. So I asked her to go stand online at the TKTS booth and get us half-price tickets for a Broadway show." "You shouldn't have made your intern do your personal stuff," I scolded. "That's not right." Dad pulled off his tie. She was glad to do it. She wanted the chance to get tickets for herself, too. "I suppose that's all right then," I said. I was glad about the tickets. If I'd had to sit around the apartment thinking about Robert all night, I might have gone nuts. We went to Joe Allen's again for dinner and then to the theater. The musical
Sure
we
enough,
saw was
Mummy,
fun
Miffy.
and uplifting. Dad was great, too. He didn't mention Robert or ask me how I was feeling. It was just what I needed. The next day, entering the Walkers' apartment was like walking into a hurricane. People from the gallery carried out paintings and illustrations. The Walkers themselves both worked feverishly, adding last-minute touches to the artwork still in front of them. Ethan hurried past me carrying one of Mr. Walker's paintings. He smiled and nodded at me, but was too rushed to stop. "Come on, kids," I said, going down the hall to Henry's room. "We're going out." Grace hopped out into the hall. "Hooray! Hooray!" she cried, bouncing as if her feet had springs. Henry came out and folded his arms. "What's wrong?" I asked. "No one is paying any attention to us," he complained. "This morning, Mommy told me to pour my own cereal." "You're big enough to do that," I said with a smile. Henry shook his head. "The Rice Krispies fell on the floor and I spilled the milk." "Bummer. What did your mom do?" "She looked up at the ceiling and said, 'Give me strength.'" "How could the ceiling give her strength?" "Cereal is not heavy," Grace added. That made me laugh. She didn't need strength to pick up the cereal. She just... How could I explain it? She's just very busy right now. We'll go out so she can get her work done. I took the kids to the Central Park Zoo. They had a great time, especially watching the seals perform their tricks. We had lunch in the park. They ate hot dogs, and I ordered a knish from a vendor. I bought them helium balloons from another vendor and let them run around in the park, trailing their balloons behind them. It was a fun day. Late that afternoon, when we returned, everything was quiet. We read books, and soon Mr. Walker came in, still paint-splattered but looking much calmer. "You can go home early," he told me. "Get ready for the opening. That's what Mrs. W is doing right now. We'll bring Henry and Grace to the opening, and you can meet us there." "All right," I said, closing the picture book I was reading to the kids. "Good luck." I went home and showered. I decided to wear the black dress and a pair of black sandals. I fixed my hair in a French braid and put on a pair of gold hoop earrings. After a quick salad, I cabbed it to the Fitzroy Gallery. There were actually limousines in front of the gallery when I arrived. I hopped out and went inside. Everything looked great. The paintings were all framed and hanging. Small lights shone across some of them. Mrs. Walker's illustrations and Mr. Walker's paintings were on different walls, but in the same rooms. Jazz music wafted through the gallery. At the far end of the main room, people milled in front of a refreshment table. A huge bouquet of tall orange flowers with pointy petals sat in the middle of the table, looking like exotic wild birds. "Stacy," Mrs. Walker called me. She looked gorgeous in a flowing gold, purple, and orange African print gown. Her dangling earrings glistened with metallic pieces. Very artistic. Claudia would have adored them. Henry and Grace were with her. Henry wore a white shirt and black pants. Grace had on a wonderful party dress of cobalt blue with a lace collar. "You look lovely," Mrs. Walker told me. "You too," I said sincerely. "So do you, Henry and Grace." I took their hands and we walked over to the refreshment table. They picked at the wide array of foods. I bit into a fat, fresh strawberry and looked around. I spotted Ethan wearing jeans, a white t-shirt, and a light white gray sports jacket. He looked awesome. In a minute, we made eye contact. He waved and came over. "Pretty cool, huh?" he commented. "Extremely," I agreed. "You look gorgeous," he said. "Thank you. You look good too." I can't begin to tell you what a wonderful night it was. Henry and Grace were angels. Ethan stayed with me as much as he could. Every once in a while, he had to rush off to help with something, but he came back often. He pointed out all the important artists and art dealers, museum curators, and gallery owners. He knew everyone, who they were and what they did. Being there with him as a guide was so much more interesting than it would have been otherwise. Henry and Grace both got sleepy around 8 o'clock. I told Mr. and Mrs. Walker I would take them home. "It's all right," Mr. Walker said. "There are 2 beds set up in the office here. Put them to sleep and then stay and enjoy the rest of the show." I stayed in the office with Grace and Henry until they fell asleep. Ethan came in and laid his sports jacket over Henry. I found a small blanket for Grace. "Come on, I'll give you the official tour of the show," Ethan offered in a whisper. "I can tell you everything about each piece." "Terrific," I said, tiptoeing out of the office. Ethan and I returned to the main room, which was now very crowded. It was amazing how much Ethan knew about the artwork and about art in general. The evening flew by, and I didn't think about Robert even once. Chapter 13. Saturday. Okay. So maybe Christy isn't altogether wrong. I admit it. I could probably learn to plan things better. It's just that I'm a fast thinker. I think fast. I move fast. I like things to happen fast. It's the way I am. But after the festival is over, it wouldn't kill me to slow down and think things through more. A little more, anyway. I wish I had thought a little more today. Saturday was my last official day of babysitting for the Walkers. They needed me so
Wake
that
up,
they could
Miffy.
be at the gallery to greet people who were coming to see the show.
Good morning,
It was
Miffy.
going to be there
Hello.
for 3 weeks. Grace and Henry were tired, so we had a stay-at-home day.
Just watching videos, drawing pictures, and reading books. That night when I returned to Dad's, Abby called me. I heard about the Robert thing, she said. I just wanted to see if you wanted to talk or
Hooray!
anything.
Special delivery
Thanks,
from
but I'm
Uncle
okay.
Pilot.
I told her. How did the festival go today?
So pretty.
It was
Oh, what
pretty
the?
wild.
Oh my gosh.
When
Oh,
people
that's so
arrived
short. I
around
thought
noon,
it was
the
that.
festival wasn't nearly ready.